The 500 hours of tapes released today showing what one historian calls Nixon's own dark view of how the world works, where the enemy is not just the communists, it's also the media. Listening in agreement is the Reverend Billy Graham.
This stranglehold has got to be broken or this country is going to go down the drain. Yes, sir. I can't ever say it, but I believe it.
Today, Dr. Graham declined to discuss those remarks, but one historian who has heard the tapes says Nixon was more hardball politician than anti-Jewish.
Nixon had a tribal and a genetic view of politics, and the Jews were a tribe he thought were against him.
Nixon's White House counsel, Leonard Garment, who is Jewish, says the president was just letting off steam in private and was no bigot.
Privately, this is the way these men talked. This is the way that generation talked about minorities.
I want to look at any sensitive areas around where Jews are involved. See, the Jews are all through the government. And we have got to get in those areas, we've got to get the man in charge who is not Jewish to control the Jewish. Do you understand? I sure do. The government is full of Jews. I sure do. Second, most Jews are disloyal. You know what I mean? You have a Garment and a Kissinger. And frankly, a Sapphire. By God, there are exceptions. But Bob, generally speaking, you can't trust the bastards. They turn on you. Are you correct? Am I wrong or right?
And their whole orientation is against this administration anyway.
But they have this arrogant attitude too. Sure. So,
and they're smart. They have the ability to do what they want to do, which is to hurt us. Which is the problem. They have the ability. Some people that are out
there. Interesting. That doesn't have any Jews. He's only got. He got this one.
He's got quite a few.
Horrible bastard.
His aides, none of his aides have ever been Jewish. Even Tony Lake, who turned on us.
That's right.
That is, the young guys that he's always had.
But I really want the Jews checked. Now, I was particularly checked the Jews throughout the administration. He's got a Jewish set in any place. And they're all working on it. And see what we can do about it. Jews are very close by. There's just this strange malignancy now that seems to creep among them. I don't know, radicalism. Very interesting thing. So few of those who engage in espionage are Negroes. Very lucky that way. As a matter of fact, very few of them become communists. But the Negroes, have you ever noticed? There's damn few Negro spies.
They're not intellectual enough. Not smart enough.
It may be.
Not smart enough to be spies.
The Jews are born spies. You know somebody of them are just in it, up to their necks.
Well, I've got a basic deviousness that...
Well, also an arrogance. An arrogance because that's what makes us funny. He puts himself above the law.
In another of the candid and sometimes coarse conversations released today, the president muses about anti-Semitism. He's talking to evangelist Billy Graham and worries about reaction to the Washington visit of Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir because Israel has just shot down a Libyan passenger plane.
This anti-Semitism is stronger than we think, you know. It's unfortunate, but this has happened to the Jews. It happened in Spain, it's happened in Germany, it's happening, and now it's going to happen in America if these people don't start behaving. It may be they have a death wish. You know, that's been the problems with our Jewish friends for centuries.
Well, they've always been, through the Bible at least, God's timepiece, and He has judged them from generation to generation, and yet used them, and they've kept their identity.
It isn't a question of whether I felt it. The fact is that American Jews support Israel.
And I understood that. And the fact is that every Jewish prime minister that I have known has enlisted American Jews to bring as much pressure as possible in the political process on American presidents. That's understandable. I don't object to it. Now, a president must not go along with it on occasion, because let me explain something about what is called the Jewish lobby in this country. In the first place, Jews, understandably in the United States, because of what happened in World War II, because of the Holocaust, are going to put first priority on the survival of Israel. Now, as good Americans, as they are, they believe that America's survival and security is directly related to Israel's. In other words, their belief is that being for Israel first means that does not mean you're putting America second, because they think it goes together. An American president, however, has to approach it in a different way, in my opinion. He's got always to think first of what is best for America, and that's true whether it has to do with the Israelis or whether it has to do with the Irish or the Germans or what have you, or the Poles, etc. Usually what is best for America is also best for Israel and vice versa. But on occasions, for example, an American president must make a decision that does not in effect give the Israelis a blank check. And one example of that is a decision that I made. I decided early on in our administration that we were going to seek good relations with Egypt and others of Israel's neighbors. Many of my Israeli friends didn't like that because they wanted a special relationship with Israel and Israel only. But I have always said that Israel's interests are better served to have the United States a friend of Israel's neighbors and potential enemies than to leave a vacuum which the Soviet Union would fill. I still believe that, and I think that should be American policy today.
The whole Watergate thing was, and let's just be candid about it, it was a Jewish Zionist conspiracy from the get-go. What was happening in the beginning of Richard Nixon's second term was that Nixon had determined that he was going to clean house. Nixon had come to realize he had been in the circles of power here in the United States, obviously, for many years. And as we now know from some of the tapes that have come out, Richard Nixon had some very set opinions about Jewish power and influence in this country. And after his re-election, his overwhelming re-election in 1972, he was beginning to make efforts in one particular area that very few people are unaware of. He was determined to reassess and reestablish and recreate the federal bureaucracy in Washington. He wanted to eliminate many of the long-time Jewish career bureaucrats who were in high-level and mid-level positions of power in the bureaucracy. And this is one of the things that he was planning to do. He was literally planning to clean house. In addition, he was determined to force the Zionist state of Israel to a major sit-down in the Middle East and solve the problems of the region. And he had back-channel operations going on to the Palestinians and to the King of Saudi Arabia, who was very anti-Zionist. And they were basically, what Nixon was saying was, we are going to force Israel and the Zionists to sit down, and we're going to sort this all out. Well, Richard Nixon, of course, had Henry Kissinger in as his Secretary of State. But Nixon was doing these things behind Kissinger's back. And when Kissinger found out about it, Kissinger started to do everything he could to undermine Nixon. Well, in the meantime, of course, the Watergate scandal erupted. Deborah Davis makes it very, very clear that the Watergate operation and the spying on Richard Nixon was being carried out by a desk, a CIA desk, in the White House, which was run by James Angleton. James Angleton was the CIA's liaison to the Mossad. In fact, Miss Davis refers to this desk in the White House as literally an Israeli counterintelligence desk. So what we had was the Watergate operation. The spying on Nixon was being run by Israeli sympathizers in the CIA. They were determined to get Nixon out of there, and that whole Watergate burglary, which was used to bring him down, was obviously deliberately bungled. The intent was for these people to be caught, and of course then the media joined in the chorus against Richard Nixon. In his book, Agnew says very, very specifically that one of the major forces in the whole Watergate affair was the Zionist influence. The Zionists assassinated Richard Nixon just as much as they assassinated John F. Kennedy. He didn't consider the power of the media. He did not consider the Jewish power over the media. And had it not been, even the media itself, they crow and they gloat that they were the ones who brought down Richard Nixon, and that is exactly who did bring down Richard Nixon, the Jewish media.
Sure, and they used two reporters for the Washington Post that is a Jewish-owned organ itself, and both the reporters are Jews. So
that's right.
And then the Daniel Ellsberg, he was a Jew in the Pentagon with the Pentagon Papers. The whole thing was a Jewish conspiracy to get Richard Nixon, and boy, it has had incredible. Am I wrong to say it was basically a coup d'etat?
That's exactly what it was. It was as much of a coup d'etat as the coup d'etat that took place in Dallas. The only difference is that Richard Nixon survived physically.
I did not break the law. Jesus Christ told you that 2,000 years ago. You don't understand me. That's your trouble.